Every spring, near the end of May, since 1954, a group of around 100 of the world's most powerful politicians, businessmen, bankers, media executives, and international royalty have been holding a secret 3-day-long meeting in an evacuated hotel that's surrounded by armed guards. And once inside, the members and invited guests engage in intense off-the-record talks about their plans for the New World Order. It's called the Bilderberg Group, or the Bilderberg Meeting, named after the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, the site of the first gathering, which was organized by Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. Attendees agree not to discuss publicly who was there or what specifically was discussed, and most of them have denied any knowledge of the Bilderberg Group at all. For over 60 years, there's been an almost complete blackout in the mainstream media about the meetings, yielding to the Bilderberg Group's wishes that they keep them out of the press. For decades, news of the infamous group spread through patriot circles and underground newsletters and websites until the advent of YouTube and social media finally forced some mainstream media outlets to admit that Bilderberg is real and some very powerful people attend. Here's a brief history of how the meetings were discovered and how news of the group began to spread. In 1957, a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist named Westbrook Pegler published the first article on the Bilderberg Group. Although he didn't know their name at the time, his report marked the beginning of the unraveling of one of the most interesting conspiracies of all time. In his 1957 article, he wrote, quote, "Something very mysterious is going on when a strange assortment of 67 self-qualified polyglot, which means multilingual, designers and arbiters of the economic and political fate of our Western world go into a secret huddle on an island of Brunswick, Georgia, and not a word gets into the popular press. These gumshoe superstate architects and monetary schemers were drawn from all NATO countries. The fact of this weird conclave, as spooky as any midnight meeting of the Klan in a piney wood, was bound to get known to the world eventually." He continues to explain how he first learned of this meeting, saying that he got tipped off by one of his readers and decided to look into it. While not yet having the group's name, Westbrook Pegler did connect them with the same gang that met on Jekyll Island to formulate the plans for the Federal Reserve. Then a man named Willis Carto read Westbrook Pegler's article, and it motivated him to begin investigating and tracking the Bilderberg Group himself. In 1958, he began publishing a newsletter that included articles exposing the Bilderberg Group, and would later start a weekly newspaper in Washington, D.C. called The Spotlight. Over 2 decades later, Jim Tucker learned of this elusive group from The Spotlight and would become the world's foremost expert on them. Jim Tucker tracked the Bilderberg Group from 1975 until his death in 2013 at the age of 78. His book, titled Jim Tucker's Bilderberg Diary, contains decades of information about where the Bilderbergers met, who was in attendance, and what was discussed. Tucker had somehow gained the support of an insider who would leak information to him every year about the location and the date of the meeting, as well as attendee lists and other information. It's foolish to claim that there hasn't been a secret arrangement between the Bilderberg Group and the American mainstream media to keep them out of the press, when over 100 of the world's most influential politicians, media owners, banking executives, and business elite fly halfway around the world to meet for 3 days in a closed-down 5-star hotel that's surrounded by armed guards. You can't say it's not newsworthy, and you certainly can't say that it's not interesting. For years, if anyone called in to any of the major talk shows like Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, and others and told the call screener that they wanted to ask about the Bilderberg Group, the call would never be put through. We're not taking calls on that right now, sorry, click. If you called and gave the call screener a bogus question and happened to be put on the air and then asked about the Bilderbergers, you would be ridiculed and the call would be dropped immediately. Something that has happened to me many times when I did this on a regular basis back in the early 2000s. After decades of news blackouts, because social media helped expose the Bilderberg Group, some outlets have reluctantly and briefly mentioned the event in attempts to avoid looking like they were covering it up, but the stories are still few and far between, and only independent outlets are going to cover it with the depth and seriousness it deserves. This is not just another ordinary political conference. This is where the global elite meet to hatch their plans. Documents leaked from the 1955 Bilderberg meeting show that they were planning the European Union an essential currency back in the 1950s, decades before the EU was formed and their new euro currency introduced. The documents are marked personal and strictly confidential and not for publication in whole or in part, and 2 years later in 1957, the European Union started to take shape with the creation of the European Economic Community, the EEC, which merged the markets of 6 European countries: France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. This later grew into the European Union in 1993, containing 28 nation states. Most of their plan has been accomplished, and while they continue to play themselves off as an ordinary business conference, the decades of denials and the media blackouts prove the Bilderberg Group has been deceptive from their inception, and the inside sources who have leaked their plans over the years prove the power that they wield. Most often, what's talked about or agreed upon inside the Bilderberg meetings soon mysteriously finds its way into becoming law. It's clear that wars, economic booms and busts, and controversial legislation are often traced back to this small group of just around 100 different people. While politicians love to point the finger at their rivals and place all the country's ills on the opposing party, throwing mud at them for various organizations they're cozy with, only a small handful of politicians have ever uttered the word Bilderberg. Former Congressman Ron Paul, one of the rare honest politicians, was once asked about the Bilderberg Group by a fan at a book signing who videotaped the interaction and posted it on YouTube.
Did you hear about that recent Bilderberg Group meeting in, what was it, Shantyville, Virginia?
Yeah, recently there was one, and there were some reports on it. I didn't read a whole lot about it, but
Man.
they certainly were there.
What do you think they're doing there? Seriously, what do you think they're doing there?
Well, they probably get together and talk about how they're going to control the banking systems of the world and natural resources. And we get together and we talk about how we're going to get our freedom back. So we have our own things to talk about too.
Notice Ron Paul didn't play dumb and didn't ridicule the man's question. Instead, he answered it quite frankly, which is surprising for a politician, particularly when it comes to talking about the Bilderberg Group. Ron Paul and his son Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, may be the only politicians in generations who have ever uttered the word Bilderberg. Because of social media and independent blogs and YouTube channels gaining so much popularity in the early 2000s, the Bilderberg's secrecy has been blown, and they, along with their accessories to the cover-up in the mainstream media, have been forced to break their silence on the group. And finally, beginning around the year 2012, some mainstream media outlets began to briefly touch on the meeting to try to give the impression that they weren't obviously blacking them out in a desperate attempt to maintain their fading facade of credibility. But every article, as rare as they are, always say that the conspiracy theorists think that the group is up to no good, while glossing over the fact that for over a half century they conveniently ignored the meetings year after year, not to mention the major talk show hosts like Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, and Glenn Beck and others ridiculed any caller who ever brought it up.
Thanks for the call, Mark, KFMB, San Diego. Next, Sean Hannity Show. How are you, Mark?
Pretty good, but with all this economic crises going on and everybody looking for answers and blame, I was wondering if you could talk about the Bilderberg Group and the role that they play in the global economy and geopolitics.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's go to Amy in Cincinnati, 55 KRC. What's up, Amy?
The brand name conservative talk show hosts are mostly just entertainers. They talk about the issue of the day, but it's just pop culture politics for them. They don't really get into the meat of the matters. They think their audience are too dumb to understand, not to mention they're all afraid to be called conspiracy theorists for daring to look behind the curtain to see who's really pulling the levers. I have, however, as you know, I've gone deep down the rabbit hole, and if you like my monologues like this, then you'll really love reading my books, especially the Bilderberg Group Facts and Fiction, which you should order in paperback from Amazon.com or download the ebook from Kindle, Nook, iBooks, or Google Play. And as many of you know, my books are a lot more in-depth and hardcore than my videos, which I have to tone down a little bit for obvious reasons. So head on over to Amazon.com or click the link in the description below and check them out.